much more than we care to think. And so therefore we should be very careful, as much as possible, to associate with good friends. Friends who encourage us towards our goodness, rather than distract us and bring us down. And then, you know, before going to bed at night, you do, you know, a few minutes more meditation to set yourself in. I mean, that's the whole day taken up, come on.
Thank you, that's really helpful advice. I'll reflect on that.
Can you please talk a little bit, Jetsunma, about the nunnery? Give some...
It's okay, I can do it. Well, all right. Well, in brief, when I first came to India, then, of course, the Tibetans were in a state of still being in sort of shock. They had left everything behind. They had seen everything which they treasured and had meaning for them destroyed and trashed. So many of them had seen their families killed in front of their eyes. They arrived in a country which was, the climate was strange, the food was strange, the language was strange, everything, and having left everything behind them. I mean, at that time they were very traumatized, although also, I will say, very cheerful, which was the thing which struck people so much when they met them, was how friendly and generous they were, even in this extraordinarily traumatic situation. And at this point, may I say, nothing to do with nunnery, but how wonderful India was to open its doors and allow these refugees in the face of China's enormous disapproval. I don't know any other country that did that, including Bhutan. So India was incredible. They allowed them in, they allowed the Dalai Lama in, all the lamas in, all the people in. They gave them land, they gave them jobs, they allowed them to start up their own schools, and they allowed them to start their own government. I mean, you know, with China breathing down their necks. So, well done, India. So at that time, then, of course, one of the main concerns, both for the monks and for the lay people, was to rebuild their monasteries again and get started. And, of course, now they have become extremely successful, and there are many very large, fancy monasteries all over India, with monks studying and practicing, and they've done really very, very well. But at that time, when I first came, which was in the early 60s, there was only one very small nunnery which had been started by actually an English woman called Frida Bedi. And for the next 30 years, basically, nobody thought about the nuns. And then eventually, 60 nuns from Tibet, from Litan, arrived, having escaped from India. And they arrived at the home of the head of the Tibetan Women's Association, whose name was Rinjin Khandro. And they said, well, here we are, and where's a nunnery? But there were no nunneries. And so they all lived in her corridors and kitchen and in the living room, 60 nuns, you know? And that was the first time she recognized, and she's the Dalai Lama's sister-in-law, that actually nothing had been done for the nuns. So then she slowly started up the Tibetan Nuns Association, and of course their main nunnery is in Drongling. Anyway, from my side, I had become a nun in '64, and worked with my Lama Kamtu Rinpoche, and on a number of occasions he said to me, I want you to start a nunnery. And at that time, since I had no money whatsoever, I said, oh yes, Rinpoche, and let's go. And in the meantime, he sent me to Lahul, and I stayed for 18 years in Lahul, and then I went to Italy. Then after Italy, I came back to India, and by this time Kamtu Rinpoche had passed away. But the head lamas of my monastery said, we want you to start a nunnery. We have nothing in our tradition for women. So then I didn't really know how to start nunneries, but I said, oh yes, all right. And so it took years. I mean, it was very hard because, first of all, I'm not a lama. I'm not even male. I'm not Tibetan. I mean, nothing romantic at all, you know, a Western nun. And the cave book hadn't been written. So nobody had a clue who I was, and whoever that means. But slowly. So then we basically started in 1999. I thought, well, let's just start. And so we got 9 young schoolgirls from Ladakh who turned up. We had nowhere to put them. They thought they were coming to a nunnery, and then they arrived and discovered they were the nunnery. So that was a bit of a shock for them. But anyway, slowly we got land, and now we've been building since then. We have, of course, to be associated with Tashijong for the Kampaka monastery. Kampa Rinpoche is our root guru. And now we have about, I don't know, somewhere between 65 to 70 nuns. They're mostly girls from the border regions, Kinnoor, Spiti, Lahul, Bhutan, Nepal, Arunachal, Ladakh, Tibet, of course. What can I say? They do a study program. There's a 9-year study program, and after 6 years they're asked if they would now rather do something else. We have 4 nuns in retreat. They have been in retreat for 4 years. They're now doing another 3 years. They're planning on 12. They want to become, in our monastery, the big thing in our monastery is that we have monks who are called Togden, which means basically they're like yogis. And so they have dreadlocks, and they wear white skirts and those striped, red and white striped zens, but they're monks. And so before he passed away, Kampa Rinpoche, the 8th Kampa Rinpoche, said to me, he put actually a silk cutter around my neck and said, in Tibet we had many Togden Ma, female Togdens, but now there are none, and so I always pray that you will restart this very precious yogini lineage which has died out. So to my mind, the underlying motivation for this nunnery is to restart the yogini lineage again. So at the moment we have, as I say, these 4 very dedicated nuns. 3 of them are Tibetan, 1 is from Kinnoor. Very, very dedicated nuns. I mean, I'm sure if we said you could stay for life, they would stay for life. So this is where we're at right now. Today the nuns have all gone off on holiday, those that can. And then they come back, and then they start the annual 2-month retreat during the rainy season when they keep silence. Now we're dealing with teenagers and 20-year-olds, and for 2 months they don't speak. And this was their choice. Of course they chant, but they don't speak to each other. They're very serious about it. And so then the rest of the time they're studying. They just finished their exams. And our hope is for all these nuns. I just came from Bhutan, visiting nunneries in Bhutan also. Our hope really is that this very neglected part of the Buddhist world, the women, will suddenly be recognized for the potential that they really have. All this time, this huge resource which has been overlooked. You know, recently when I was in Bhutan, I met with the Prime Minister, and he started by saying, you know, I have always thought that women are usually much more spiritual and devoted than the males. And often they're also more intelligent. So how come that we have overlooked them for so long? This is of course a great shame for Bhutan, and we are hoping in the future that we will redress the balance. And so they are. They're really trying now to work with their nuns and educate them properly and put them in retreats and teach them to have more actual confidence in themselves, to really believe actually they can do anything. Why not? And it will only enhance the Buddhist world. I mean, nobody loses. It's a win-win situation, isn't it? I mean, who loses? Nobody loses. It's not a cake. You know, if we give the girls this much, then we only have that much. You know, it's not like that. So everybody wins. And so anyway, our nunnery of Donjigatsaling, if any of you are in that area, it's about 2 hours from here, near to Tashijong and Bir. And there's a little notice on the road saying DGL that way. And so you're all very welcome to come and visit. Please do.
First of all, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today. It's been a very interesting and enlightening lecture. And I just have a question, because I'm struggling right now with something that I'm not sure if it belongs to the Tibetan box or if it's essential to the Dharma, the elixir. And I think you're somebody who's in an ideal position to answer this, actually. And it has to do with rebirth, because I've been reading a lot of texts. They go into an incredible amount of detail about what happens after we die, and the karmic winds and all these things. And I can't help but get the impression that sort of the reason why we want to practice is so that we don't have to go through this existence thing again. You know, like existence seems like kind of a punishment, right? Like if you don't get it this time and you commit selfish actions and you're ignorant, then you're going to have to come back and do it all over again. And you know, it's kind of a nice idea that maybe we'll get as many tries as we want till we eventually get it right. But the underlying assumptions kind of seems to be that existence is something that we don't want to have to do if we can always avoid it. So I'm wondering, in your opinion, is this something that is sort of superimposed on the Dharma? Because the Buddha himself, he remains quite agnostic about speculations about deities and the eternal life of the universe. And I know, of course, he comes from the Indian cultural background, which values rebirth. But for me personally, I'm struggling with it because I don't know if I find it such a useful concept, and yet at the same time it gets such emphasis.
Okay, so rebirth or not rebirth? Well, the traditional account of the Buddha's enlightenment experience was that while he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, in the first watch of the night, he went back through all his past lives and saw, at that time I was so-and-so of such and such a caste and so-and-so, and I did this and this and this, and then I died in this way, and then I came back as that. And he went, you know, through all his lifetimes. In the second watch of the night, his mind opened up still further, and he saw the coming and going of all beings in the universe, at which point he understood karma, right? Because he could see. And in the third watch of the night, he realized interdependent origination, and at that point he realized he was a Buddha. So from a very traditional point of view, you could say that very much a part of the Buddha's enlightenment experience was that his mind opened up to see the coming and going and interconnection of all the beings in the universe. And on the basis of that, he taught karma. The second point is that from the point of Mahayana, if you accept the Bodhisattva vow, then you are vowed to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings and to lead all sentient beings to liberation, that it would be impossible to do in one lifetime. Even the Buddha couldn't manage that. Right? So, therefore, the idea of being reborn again and again and again is a very inherent part of the spiritual journey. This is why, for example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is regarded as being the 14th Dalai Lama. I mean, that it wasn't just an arbitrary thing, but that he has to keep coming back again and again and again to fulfill his vow to benefit all beings. Right? So here you've got two things. One thing is ordinary people are thrown back again and again into the wheel without really any say in where they're going to come, depending on their past actions. Right? So you get reborn wherever. And those who died consciously,